Hello to all of you from around the world. I want to welcome you back to another great edition of Soulivity Today. We're broadcasting live from our studio right here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., AM radio in Southern California. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I'm so glad you're here with us. I hope you're ready to begin another amazing week. As always, this is another Motivational Monday, but today we are talking about the latest and greatest legal news from across the United States. You know, it's important for us here at Soulivity to make sure that we empower you with fact-based information so you can be totally informed when you may need to make decisions about your elected officials or even political issues. And to help us navigate all of these different stories is a very special guest. Let's learn more about her right now. Asha Rangappa is an assistant dean and senior lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School of Global Affairs and a former associate dean at Yale Law School. Now, Asha served formerly as a special agent in the New York division of the FBI, specializing in counterintelligence investigation. Now, her work involved assessing threats to national security, conducting classified investigations on suspected foreign agents, and performing undercover work. And while she was at the FBI, she gained experience in intelligence tradecraft, electronic surveillance, interview and interrogation techniques, and firearms and the use of deadly force. Now, while at Yale, she teaches courses on national security law, Russian information warfare, and leadership and ethics. And she's also the author of The Freedom Academy, an online Substack publication about disinformation and its impact on democracy. Now, her long list of opinion pieces include being published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and the Washington Post, among others, and she's a legal contributor for ABC News. She's also the editor for Just Security and is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. You can catch her It's Complicated podcast with fellow legal eagle Renato Mariotti every week on Apple, Spotify, and many other podcast distributors. You don't want to miss it. Woohoo! I have been waiting for this, waiting for. Sorry, we had a little bit of difficulty with the sound here. How have you been, Asha? I've been looking forward to this for so long. I mean, it's been like a couple of months, and I've been like, ah.
I've been good. It's been a lot to follow, but yeah, I think going okay.
Now, just want to remind people again too that listen, if you have like comments or anything during our show, just post them to our live feeds, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. We have limited time with Asha today, but that's okay because we're going to get to a whole lot of different legal news. Asha, we were talking offline about the sheer amount of activity that's happening in the legal world, the judicial world, both civil, criminal, that crosses over into the political. How do you navigate, first and foremost, just how do you navigate just having all this information coming in? I mean, do you have to like pick and choose a lot of times what you're kind of studying?
Yeah, I do. Especially right now, because with Trump alone, there's 5 different major legal proceedings going on. Major.
Right.
There's also other ones, right? And in each of those, they're in different stages. There's procedural motions, and which involve complex legal issues. So I kind of am using what's being covered in the news to just kind of make, like, prioritize. I'm just triaging what I need to be on top of. And then, I mean, fortunately, being a lawyer and having gone to law school, I can do research in a pinch and get up to speed on things. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I can't imagine that for the lay person, it's easy to know what's going on.
Yeah, well, Well, that's why we want to do the show. I was thinking about this with our staff for the last, I mean, even before you came on a couple of months ago. Like, I know that the major media is covering some of this, but there's so much that there's other things that are happening that don't get as much love. So we're trying to give those things some love too.
Yep.
And so thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back. I'm already saying you're going to come back again, even
I'm
after
happy
this.
to.
So I'm like, I'm gonna make you a regular girl. Listen,
Okay.
let's get to our first story here, which comes from Newsweek, where on Friday, former President Donald Trump is headed directly to conviction for his alleged involvement in the January 6th Capitol riot, according to the legal analyst and scholar Lawrence Tribe. Um, this is a really bold statement by Lawrence,
Hmm.
and it was picked up like immediately and was like fire across all the news networks. What is this all about, Asha?
Yeah. So first, I respect Professor Tribe hugely. I mean,
Yeah.
he's an icon in legal academia, in the legal profession. I am a little bit more cautious about the cases
Right,
than him.
right.
However, what he is really emphasizing in that article is that Judge Tanya Chutkin, who is a federal judge overseeing Trump's charges in the January 6th case, not to be
Yeah.
confused with the several other criminal cases that he is under indictment,
Whew.
um, rejected Trump's claim of absolute immunity from prosecution.
Right.
And basically, what Trump was trying to do was use a Nixon era case that said that presidents would be immune from civil liability for actions which are taken in the outer perimeter of their presidential duties. In other words, if a president is, let's say, let's take President Carter when he um, froze lawsuits against Iran as a way to negotiate with Iran to release hostages.
Okay.
You don't want you don't want a president to be to second guess things that they might want to do because somebody might sue them later and say, hey, you dismissed
Right.
my lawsuit. Okay.
Right.
That's what the Supreme Court was trying to say in that case. And what Trump wanted to do is extend that reasoning to the criminal context and say that's what the Supreme Court said, in Nixon. I think that also means that presidents should be absolutely immune for any criminal acts, any criminal liability for conduct in the outer perimeter of their presidential duties. And this
Okay.
encountered several problems, which the judge highlights, which is number one, what Trump was doing on January 6th was not in the outer perimeter of his presidential duties. In other words, it's not in some gray area that's you could arguably say is even an extension of his role as a president. He was
Mm-hmm,
acting in his
mm-hmm.
private capacity. He was running for
Right.
reelection. He was trying
Right.
to win. So, she takes that out. But then I think what's really important is she says the criminal context is very different. This is this
Mm,
is conduct
mm.
that Congress has, criminalized because they think it is that serious. And unlike a civil case, like if, civil cases can be brought by anyone,
Right.
the bar is lower. And, there is the possibility that um, people could engage in frivolous litigation and chill the
Mm-hmm,
president's actions. She said that's just not the case with a criminal
mm,
liability. There are
mm-hmm.
so many procedural safeguards. You have to get an indictment from a grand jury. It can only be brought in the federal context, by the Department of Justice. In other words, you're not going to open the floodgates to
Right.
a president
Right.
being charged all over the place
That makes
because
sense.
she says, you know, I think the quote is a president has many difficult decisions. deciding whether to intentionally commit a criminal act is not one of them. And so what she's basically saying is if a president decides to cross that line, then yes, he's going to have to be held accountable. And what I think is really good is that she goes into the text and the history of the, Constitution to support her claim. And this really, I think what Trump was really hoping to do was get this case just thrown out from the get-go. So it's going to proceed. Now, I will say he is allowed to, during the course of the trial, present evidence that this was in the outer perimeter of his presidential duties. And he can actually then, so this was called a motion to dismiss, which is a motion to get the case thrown out before it even goes to trial. At the end of the trial, he could file what's called a motion for summary judgment, which says, look, I presented evidence as a matter of law that I was acting in, this gray area of my presidential duties. You need to just, get rid of this case at this stage. I don't think that's going to happen. And, one of the things that the judge cites, which I thought was really interesting, is that in that flood of litigation after the 2020 election, where, his allies and cronies were filing lawsuits all over the place, Trump intervened in one of them and actually says, this is in a Supreme Court filing, I'm intervening in my personal capacity as a candidate running for office. So he's actually made a legal filing saying, I am acting as Donald Trump, person running for office, not Donald Trump as president. And so I don't think that this is going to go anywhere. Now, I will add that the one benefit for him, potentially, is that he can appeal this ruling. It's likely not going to go anywhere with the Court of Appeals, because the Court of Appeals also struck down this argument in the civil context, because he's being sued by people who were injured who suffered emotional distress on January 6th. And he tried to make the same argument. That was rejected. But, and I think this will connect to a topic we're going to talk about later, it's likely that the Supreme Court will take it up. And I don't think that there is really any legal purchase on his argument at all. But I think, sadly, we are in a place where I don't know that we can always count on the Supreme Court or a majority to really say what the law is objectively. I'm worried about that. I think that they will not, because it would be such a profound shaping of the office of the presidency, even at the expense of the judicial branch. Importantly here, to say that the president is effectively above the law. So, but that is what
I can't imagine the ramifications behind in the future if the Supreme Court basically ruled in favor of Donald Trump, saying basically that he's above the law. And now where does that go with other politicians and other presidents that come down the line? Imagine if he's reelected and this is the president that has been set for him even after he's out of the executive branch, as a private citizen. That's scary to me.
100%. And just to simplify this for your listeners, Trump's argument is basically the Nixon maxim: if the president does it, it's not illegal. It is basically an argument that whatever the president does, he is above the law. And if you're absolutely right, if that gets adopted, not only is that anathema to our system of justice, but it is going to be carte blanche for Trump to do anything he wants in a second presidency. And, this is all of a piece of his legal theory for everything, right? So, he believes that when you are president, you're above the law. If you look at some of his executive privilege arguments, he believes that when you leave office, you're still entitled to the powers of the presidency. basically, he believes that the president can never be held accountable, and that once you hold the office, you
Right.
hold those powers for life. That's kind of, if you put
Right.
all of his different legal arguments together.
Right.
So it's like he's
Right.
already acting as though he's president for life, slash king slash dictator.
Right.
And if the Supreme Court were to put a rubber stamp on that, we are in big, big trouble.
Well,
I know it's only Monday, but I
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
start
yeah.
everybody's week off with this, but it is true.
But it's true. But it is absolutely true. And again, that's why we're covering this, right? That's why we're
Yeah.
covering these kind of stories, because of the fact that if we don't, and we're not having really rich conversations within our communities, within our little social groups and our tribes around things like this, we can't make informed decisions when we go to the ballot box, right?
Yeah.
Which is where our power lies, right? In electing officials that absolutely represent our value sets, our morals, and that kind of thing. And is the president a king? The president's never been a king.
No.
It just does not exist. So speaking of kings, our next story comes from USA Today, where again where they are tackling reporting about the latest, about the other side of the ongoing legal woes for former President Donald Trump in the New York civil trial. Um, so much to talk about when it comes to Old 45. Um, Asha, what do you believe we should know about this particular trial at this stage of the trial? Because it correct me if I'm wrong, they've already gone through basically a hearing where Donald Trump and the Donald Trump organization has been found guilty of whatever the charges were in the civil case. And now they're moving to the punishment phase. And so now they're arguing over how should the company and the officers of the company be punished according to New York state law. Is that correct?
It's almost correct. So
Okay, all right. I'll
basically,
take the
yeah,
almost. I'll take the almost.
yeah. And I think it's a common, it's a slight misunderstanding. And again, this is just because of the legal complexities of civil
Gotcha.
lawsuits. So there were 7 civil actions that were brought against Trump for various forms of business fraud and falsified documents. What the judge ruled was on the first count that Trump, as a matter of law, and the Trump organization falsified business documents. And
Okay.
he imposed a
Okay.
few penalties which have been stayed, which have been put on hold, including canceling his business certifications in the state of New York. For counts 2 through 7, the statutes require proving that not only was there fraud and falsification, but that it was done intentionally. So right now, the
Oh.
trial is about whether Letitia James, the state attorney general, can prove that not only were these documents and records being falsified and, to insurance companies, et cetera, but they were all doing it knowingly, that everybody knew what was going on, and, that this was
Okay.
a deliberate effort to defraud. And
Okay.
if they can prove that, then the penalty will be much greater. Obviously, if you were intentionally deceiving as opposed to, you're just a sloppy bookkeeper, for example, right?
Right.
So what happens is, if they were intentionally engaging in this fraud and falsification, then they benefited illegally, right? Like, they made profits illegally. And so what Attorney General James wants to do ultimately, if she prevails, is to disgorge them of their profits, which means that
Oh.
not only does Trump would not be able to do business in New York, which is what she wants to say also, but that he has to give money back. And
Ooh.
all, and so they would calculate over all the years how much that he's milked, the state of New York, for example, and lost tax revenue, and um, how much he's made the insurance companies, frankly, lose money and lost premiums, because if they
Hmm.
understood the actual risk they were taking on with him, they would have charged him more, right? And
Wow.
yeah, so that's one of her theories of the case, is when he overinflated the values of his property to insurance companies,
Hmm.
they thought he was a lower risk. They thought their collateral was
Right.
worth more. So
Right.
they would have given him a lower premium.
Right.
So they,
Right.
you know, or the loan companies, like they would have charged him a higher interest rate. So, um, in other words, these companies have lost money as well as the state of New York, and that he would have to be disgorged. So there's a huge potential financial penalty for him here, and this is why he's freaking out. And I think that sometimes this case gets overlooked because the criminal
Yeah.
stuff is a lot sexier, right? Like we like to watch Law and
Right.
Order. We like to imagine,
Right.
Trump in an orange jumpsuit or whatever, which I don't think is going to
Right.
happen. But honestly, him losing his livelihood and what is makes his brand, which is his wealth or the perception of his wealth,
Yeah.
I think it goes to the heart. I think it could be a much greater penalty than any kind of criminal liability for him, because it's something that's so visible and so visceral, and
Right.
gets to the heart of who he is. So I think that he's freaking out, and I think that this also has implications for a second Trump presidency, because if Trump is has to pay a huge financial penalty, goes broke, can't do business anymore, then I think we need to think about how he's going to approach the presidency. He already treated the US Treasury as his personal piggy bank.
Right.
If
Right.
you think that that's
Right.
not going to happen when he no longer has money,
Right.
if you think that he won't see relationships with other countries around the world as purely transactional
Yeah.
and figure out ways of profiting personally from those,
Right.
when because
Yeah.
he no longer will have his Trump organization.
Right.
I think that's and that is a hallmark of authoritarian leadership, right?
Yeah.
Is
Right.
how can I, use this position to my own personal benefit, not to the public's benefit. And
Right.
he's always been that way, but I think that it would be exacerbated if he feels desperate. Like if he can't get loans from anywhere, well, guess where he's going to go for loans? And what are those
Right.
countries going to ask for in return?
Well, I highly recommend people. I'm trying to remember the news story. I'll probably post it in our chat for later for folks. But pay attention, go back into 2020 after the election and look at Steve Mnuchin, look at Jared Kushner, where they were in the world during those last 3 months, based upon their positions. They were out selling and trying to get money. And that's just the Secretary of Treasury and an advisor. So imagine a president who's broke and what he's going to do in a lame duck presidency. There will be no guardrails for him. He'll blow through every tradition, every
And and
and all that.
this is where I think people need to understand the awesome powers of the presidency and how it
Yes.
intersects. You know,
Yeah.
the the president of the United States has basically plenary power to negotiate with foreign officials and
Yes.
foreign heads of state. That's not something that Congress has oversight over for separation of
Right.
powers reasons. I mean, this goes back
Right.
to President Washington. He did not want to turn over diplomatic cables to Congress.
Right.
He said that this is
Right.
not your role. This is my role under. So we saw this before, for example, with Trump, when he wouldn't hand over, when he was meeting with Putin by himself and tore up his
Right.
translator's notes and all of this stuff. So we won't know. There's actually, like, we don't know what the president discusses with
Right.
other heads of state. And there's no legal mechanism to know that. We are giving him the authority to do that, to do it, and to do
Right.
it privately, to do it in secret, to never know what comes of those conversations
Right.
when we elect that person the president of the United States. I'm just
Hmm.
adding that in
Yeah.
there because I don't think most people understand. They're like, oh, it'll come out and we can find out through here. No, you're not going to ever find out.
No. No. And I mean, things like the Presidential Records Act and all that stuff does not really apply here, right? Um, and again, they can choose to they can choose not to record, not to do stuff as Trump did during his presidency. They just didn't record anything, or if they did, they
Right.
you know you hear flushing things down the toilet and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
That right. Listen, we're gonna take a very very quick break, Asha and everyone. But we've got more legal news coming up, including something that's been happening in the Democratic-led Senate. So just stay tuned, and we'll be right back in about 2 minutes.
Do you see me kneeling on this dual roller called Parasetter? It's actually comfortable because of this channel and the softness of the special foam. It feels like my kneecaps are being massaged. When I lie down, my spine is housed in this channel, while the convex rollers massage my muscles. They let go and lengthen. There's a traction effect from my head on the headrest and my mid-back from the rib wrap, which hugs me. When I start the breathing sequence, I feel calm because my cortisol levels are dropping. Lower cortisol means bye-bye constant hunger. Parasetter is 40 inches long and much more comfortable than old-style rollers, but it weighs only 10 ounces. Parasetter, just like Pilates was, is no longer an insider secret. Do yourself a favor. Reset your parasympathetic nervous system. Defeat stress. Lying, sitting, kneeling, or standing. This unique patented roller helps everyone.
Six years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
Hey there, we're back here with more on Soulivity Today. We are talking with legal expert Asha Rangappa, who I'm a big fan of. I just told her that a little bit later ago, who's also the assistant dean and senior lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School of Global Affairs. This next story, Asha, it's very important, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier today. Comes from Reuters, where a Democratic-led U.S. Senate panel on Thursday last week authorized subpoenas to two influential conservatives, Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo, as part of an ethics inquiry spurred by reports of undisclosed generosity directed to some conservative Supreme Court justices. Asha, this case is just fascinating to me, or this whole legal aspect of the Supreme Court and ethics, and I would say what we should be expecting from the highest court in the land in terms of the people who are justices there. What are your thoughts about what's happening? Because basically, the Supreme Court has been kind of self-regulating itself forever. And it seems as though, based upon reporting, that that's not something that is working. And so Congress has the ability to actually pass laws around ethics that apply to the Supreme Court. What is your thoughts about all of this?
I think we have a crisis in the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And it's bad because what we have, and at least with Clarence Thomas, in the reports that have just come out, one after the other, of him accepting, as you said, largesse from, wealthy donors, by the way, who are then bringing cases in front of the Supreme Court in which they have an interest. This is the issue. It's not just
Right.
taking
Right.
the money and then not disclosing it as though,
Right.
like that we just need to know. It's that the people that are giving him the trips and the vacations and all of this, and also Sam Alito has been caught up in this as well. They are funding concerted efforts to bring cases in front of the Supreme Court, specific cases that raise
Right.
specific issues, mainly centering around things like deregulation of
Right.
industries, of reducing government oversight and, um, you know, accountability of different industries in which those donors have an interest, in which they will make money
Right.
if the Supreme Court rules the way that they want. This is a problem. And here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of cases these people are bringing, these deregulation, etc., these are not the sexy cases. It's not the abortion case, for example. These
No.
are, can the Fish and Wildlife Service require, fishermen
Right.
to do X, Y? Nobody's paying attention because they seem really boring. They seem like just, oh, who cares what the FDA does? Who cares what the Fish and Wild? But these are the things that keep us safe. These are
Right.
the things that help our environment. These are the things that ensure that a company's interest in profit is balanced by things that are also in the public good, which are not
Right.
always, naturally going to work out.
One
And so this is the
major
problem.
case one major case I'm thinking about as you're talking about it is that people didn't pay enough attention to. It was a couple of years ago where basically there was a ruling that came down that basically almost gutted the Clean Air Act, something that has been
Yes.
around for what, 50 years, and
Yeah,
no
since
one
the
had
70s.
any
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, no one had any issues around what it was for. And by the way, it was passed with highly bipartisan efforts back in the day. Democrats and
Mm-hmm.
Republicans agreed, yes, we need to do this for our future. And now it's really important because of climate change and global warming. And it got gutted because businessmen brought cases against, basically targeting the Clean Air Act and saying, well, it's too broad, right? And that there needs to be more specific regulation and Congress has to pass it and blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. And what you're pointing to is really, they're not just going after, the specific laws. They're going after the ability of executive branch agencies to make discretionary decisions based on
right,
ambiguity in laws that Congress passes. In other words, what
right,
they're trying to do is hobble the ability of these agencies to essentially interpret and execute the laws that Congress has passed. And they're saying, no, these agencies can't make those reasonable determinations that they're allowed to do X, Y,
right,
Z. So the Congress and that kind of ruling is just going to make many of these laws inoperable.
right, right,
If these agencies can't do things to some degree with a degree of discretion, they're not going to be able
right,
to operate. And we rely on them being able to do that. Every time a new drug comes on the market or, some issue comes up, we rely on the FDA being able to figure out how to incorporate that into their existing scheme. If
right,
every time something happens, they have to go back to Congress and look at Congress is paralyzed right now. That affects us. It affects us in our
right,
everyday lives, and people need to realize that. So going back to Clarence Thomas, these are the cases that these people are bringing, and they're taking him on fishing trips and luxury vacations. And not only that, he's not disclosing it. So what is going on here?
right.
It's
Right.
not like he's saying he's being all on the up and up and he's saying, look, I've got, these people are taking me. And by the way, I'm recusing because I just like to go on the luxury vacation, but I'm going to
Right.
recuse. No, this
Right.
is all happening in secret. And I think that is simply antithetical to how a democracy should function because there's no accountability or
And I
transparency.
think, and I'll just kind of add on to that. And what's really particularly heinous is that it appears to me, based upon the response from Justice Thomas and some others, they think that this is perfectly okay. They have no. It's like, what? So what? This is a friend of mine. He took me on some trips and that kind of thing. And it's like, really? You don't understand the ethical dilemma that you're putting yourself in terms of judging a case for a friend that has given you all this stuff? Come on. Come
Yeah.
on.
No, I mean, here's the
Yeah.
thing. They think they are gods in robes, right? And we're seeing this in other ways where they are overturning long-standing case law. I mean, look, there is a principle in the law called stare decisis, which means that when you have precedent that is given great deference unless something significant has changed, and yet they're
Right.
tossing it out the window. Many of these cases, by the way, that people like Leonard Leo are funding and bringing are being
Right.
brought in very deliberately in front of Trump judges in
Right.
districts like Texas, where
Right.
they
Right.
know that those judges are going to basically be activist and kind of
Mhm.
impose like have some very novel interpretation of the law that then will automatically go up to the Supreme Court and then be
Right.
enshrined as the law of the land.
Right. Right.
um and so it's kind of a whole system. And what to go back to the Senate Democrats, we're finally pulling back the curtain on this because for so
Right.
long we focused on corruption with the presidency and corruption in Congress. And look, there's no dearth of that, and
Right.
it goes, and it's not just Republicans. I mean, Senator Menendez just got indicted for basically being a foreign agent of Egypt. So, there's a lot to go
Did we?
around
Yeah, we
here.
talked about that last time, right? We
Oh
talked
my
about
God,
that
it's
last time.
crazy. Yeah. But we've
But
trusted the Supreme Court as somehow being able to, as you said, self regulate and self police. And, I think we would ideally love to believe that judges and especially Supreme Court justices could do that. But, Brian, as you and I were discussing before the show started, I think the problem is that we've gotten to a point where Supreme Court justices are selected based on ideology and
yeah,
not based on
yeah.
what they used to be looked at for was judicial temperament,
Yes.
being moderate,
Yes.
being
Yeah.
fair, being impartial, being
Yeah.
objective, all of these things that would create a sober mindset that might say, as you just said, maybe I shouldn't take all this money and keep it secret, and then not recuse myself from a case when they're bringing it. That's
Right.
sadly, I don't think we have many justices anymore with that
Right.
mindset.
Right. I was I'm reminded that before it was rare before Bork, right? Because we had Bork and then we had Thomas, right? And Thomas was in
Hmm.
response to Bork getting borked, right? That
Correct.
was the whole right back in the
Correct.
day. That presidents who picked a nominee for the Supreme Court, it was rare that it wasn't almost a unanimous vote for that
Yeah.
particular person, right? So
Hmm.
just letting people know that when Bork came along, that person couldn't even get to a majority of the vote. But then Justice made it on a almost completely partisan vote. I mean, it was something like 60-40 or something like that, I think, back in the day. And then from that point forward, there's been
Yeah.
this this break, right? I agree with you. I think there is a crisis going on in the Supreme Court. And again, we're talking about this and putting a spotlight on this, everyone, because you need to pay it. This is something you really need to pay attention to. Things like,
And
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead, please finish your talk.
Well, we just had the huge rail event, the whole event in Ohio, right? Which has to do with both regulation around how people are able to store chemicals and all that kind of stuff, and how far away they need to be from communities, and what's the regulations around rail that's transporting this particular chemical and all this kind of thing. All that matters because that power of the executive to regulate in that way has been eroded slowly and slowly and slowly over time. So again, want to try to educate people. But go ahead, Asha. Yeah, the thought.
Yeah, well, to your point about the regulation, I mean, I think the other red flag, and which is kind of a tell, is that, if you saw corruption in a branch of government, you would think that another co-equal branch, there would be bipartisan support to say, hey, we need to stop this, right? Because this isn't about just, conservative or liberal justices. We want anyone who's taking money to disclose it and not not be adjudicating cases in which they might have a conflict of interest. But weirdly, the Republicans in the Senate are really mad that they're trying to pull back the curtain on these people. And why?
I get
because
it,
of
but
what we
I
just
don't
said.
get it.
They're corporate interests. And those corporate interests, those same companies, those same interests are also donating a lot of money to these elected officials.
Right.
In other words, this is a whole system that has been behind the scenes, has just been running like a little machine, and no one's been paying attention to it. And now, the curtain's being pulled back and connections are being made among all the laws that Congress is passing, what it's trying to do through legislation, and what the court is trying to do, and how the money that's coming in to all of this is connected.
Wow.
And I hate saying this because I still believe that this is the best country in the world. I believe we have a democracy and institutions that can work. And so I don't want people to think that, where we throw up our hands and say, everybody's corrupt, who cares, forget it, and become apathetic. But there is a line where we can't be Pollyannish anymore, and we do need to reform. I think there needs to be some major, reorganization, let's say, of the ethics of the Supreme Court.
You know what? I could talk with you forever about all this stuff. It just, I'm thinking now of things like Citizens United and the effect that had on everything.
Everything
like that we're talking about now. Maybe that's something we can talk about in the future, because I think that people need to really understand how all these dots connect, and that they're not these disparate kind of things. Oh, well, this happened over here and this has nothing to do with this over here. And it's like, no, it's all connected, and you need to stay informed. And so that's what we're trying to do here. I know, Asha, you got to run.
I do.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, just wanted to let people know that Asha is so out in the public sphere. You're on ABC News. I see you on other news networks commenting about what's happening in the world. But you've got a great podcast with your partner, Renato Maliati. It's Complicated on YouTube, which is just fantastic, as well as you have your own website at asharangappa.com with your that people can also go to and subscribe to your Substack, email. I appreciate you so much because you bring some honesty and some realism to all of this and help us kind of wade through all of this, not only as a legal scholar, right, but just as a citizen. Like, what kind of country do I want to live in? What in terms of like what's happening in Supreme Court and all this. It's like, how do I want my elected officials to be held accountable? How do I want our judiciary to be held accountable? Right? So that all of us live in a country where there's a certain level of morality when it comes to how we treat each other, and civility in terms of how we treat each other, and that kind of thing. So thank you just for being here. Thank you for being here. Of
Thank
course,
you. Thank you for
I'm
having
gonna be
me. I like the
yeah,
conversation.
yay. Okay, I'll ask you formally, will you come back again and talk more
Of course.
with us?
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
we'll talk about that whole like Citizens United into the ethics thing in
Yeah.
the
That would be
context
good.
of everything. That'd be a really cool conversation. So listen, we're going to let you go, but everybody stay right there. We've got more of Soulivity Today coming up in just a second. So we'll be right back. Hi there. This is Brian with Soulivity.com. I want to share some exciting news about our new Aspire Academy by Soulivity. Now, you probably want to know what the Aspire Academy by Soulivity is. Well, it exclusively connects you with people around the globe and who share the intense desire to improve themselves and create a better life for themselves today. There's classes, there's workshops, there's live events, and even more exclusively just for you. You see, I wanted you to have a safe space where you could grow, you can learn, and it would empower you in all aspects of your life, including your mind, your body, and your soul. So how do you get started? Well, it is so easy. First of all, the best part, joining Aspire Academy is absolutely free. Just click on the Join Now button, sign up, and begin your journey. As a special part of this invitation to you, there are some free courses that are available for you to try from our amazing roster of coaches and collaborators. It's our way of saying thank you for all of your support and being with us along our journey of expansion. I hope you enjoyed the Aspire Academy by Soulivity today. Start the process. Learn more about your passion, your purpose, and how to live a higher quality life. Find all of the Satana products at our Go shop at go.soulivity.com.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Hey, we're back with more on Soulivity Today. Listen, we were talking with legal expert Asha Rangappa, Assistant Dean and Senior Lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School of Global Affairs. We want to thank her for joining us today. Again, you can catch her on her great podcast, It's Complicated, with former federal prosecutor Renato Martirati, by going to their YouTube channel at its.complicated. As well as go check her out on her website, which is fantastic, at asharangappa.com. Listen, we're running out of time. Just want to let you guys know you can find out more information about what's going on with soulivity.com by, first of all, at soulivity.com, where you can check out our new exclusive interview with Dr. Lynn Richardson, who's the founding co-director of the Institute for Health Equity Research. This is a special series on bridging the gap for health equity for all by Soulivity. It's something that we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis. Also, check out our social media accounts across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, and especially YouTube, because you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch all of our fantastic Soulivity TV content. I just love the fact that we are talking about all this legal news. We want to keep you guys all informed so that you can be more effective and efficient citizens. This is part of our role here in the United States of becoming more aware about what's happening in the world so that we can make effective decisions about our politicians, as well as any political issues that are going on either at the local, state, or federal level. So listen, thank you for being here. This is how we're going to be doing it here every day at Soulivity Today, where we're talking about a wide range of topics, all designed to keep you empowered every single day. And until next time, on behalf of all of us here at Soulivity.com, our co-hosts, our authors, our contributors, thank you for being here, and keep learning about living your life with passion, purpose, so that you can create your best life, your highest quality life today. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.